Welcome to the channel where everyday pocket change turns into hidden treasure and incredible stories come to life. And today we're diving into one of the most mysterious and controversial Lincoln cents ever discussed in the coin collecting world, the 1982 D1 cent, a coin that many people overlook but that has sparked legends, heated debates, and jaw-dropping price claims reaching as high as $368 million because of its rare errors, unusual transitions, and the once-in-a-lifetime possibilities surrounding this pivotal year in U.S. mint history. So get comfortable and imagine reaching into your pocket and pulling out what looks like an ordinary penny, only to discover it could change your life forever, because 1982 was not just another year for the Lincoln cent. It was a turning point that created confusion, experimentation, and opportunities for extraordinary mistakes, making it one of the most complex and fascinating cents ever produced, especially those struck at the Denver Mint, where the small d mint mark has become the focus of intense scrutiny, speculation, and collector obsession. The story begins with the rising price of copper in the early 1980s, when the cost of producing a penny was becoming more expensive than the coin's face value, forcing the U.S. Mint to rapidly transition from the traditional 95% copper composition to a new copper-plated zinc planchet. And in 1982 this change happened abruptly and without a clear single cutoff, resulting in two different metal compositions being used in the same year, combined with multiple dies, different date styles, and the pressures of mass production, creating a perfect storm for errors, mismatches, and anomalies that collectors are still discovering decades later. The 1982 D1 cent is especially intriguing because, according to official records, Denver Mint cents that year were supposed to be struck only on the new zinc planchets, yet collectors have long hunted for examples that defy expectations, including alleged transitional errors struck on leftover copper planchets, off-metal strikes, wrong planchet errors, and pieces with unusual weights that suggest something went terribly wrong during production. And when you combine that with the existence of large date and small date varieties, die deterioration, double dies, repunched mint marks, and striking anomalies, the number of possible high-value combinations grows dramatically. One of the most famous and controversial possibilities tied to the 1982 D cent is the idea of a copper composition Denver Mint penny from that year, a coin that theoretically should not exist. And while authenticated examples remain the subject of intense debate, the mere possibility has fueled some of the highest speculative valuations ever discussed in modern coin collecting. Because a confirmed 1982 D struck on a full copper planchet would represent a mint error of historic significance, comparable to other legendary transitional errors that have sold for 6 and 7 figures. And when collectors and media outlets speculate on what such a coin could bring at auction, numbers like $368 million are sometimes mentioned to illustrate just how priceless such a discovery could be in the right circumstances, especially if it were unique, perfectly preserved, and backed by ironclad authentication. Beyond composition errors, the 1982 D cent is also known for dramatic die errors that can multiply its value exponentially, including strong double dies where the date, lettering, or Lincoln's portrait show clear separation, not machine doubling but true hub doubling that occurred during the die creation process, making each affected coin a genuine rarity. And when such doubling appears on a coin from a year already famous for its complexity, collectors pay very close attention. There are also off-center strikes where the planchet was not properly seated, broad strikes where the coin was struck without a collar causing it to spread out wider than normal, and cap die errors where a coin sticks to the die and repeatedly strikes other planchets, each one creating bizarre, distorted impressions that are highly collectible and can be worth thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars depending on severity and condition. Another layer of intrigue comes from weight anomalies, because copper cents should weigh about 3.11 grams while zinc cents weigh around 2.5 grams, and some 1982 D cents fall somewhere in between or slightly outside expected tolerances, raising questions about experimental planchets and proper alloy mixes, or contamination during the plating process. And while many of these turn out to be minor variations, a small number may represent genuine mint mistakes that elevate the coin into elite territory. Add to this the potential for wrong planchet errors, such as a 1982 cent struck on a planchet intended for another denomination, or even a foreign planchet, and you begin to understand why this coin is endlessly fascinating, because each new discovery has the potential to rewrite what we think we know about the year. Condition plays a massive role as well, because while millions of 1982 cents were struck, finding any error coin in pristine, uncirculated condition with full original luster and no damage is extraordinarily difficult, and values rise dramatically when a rare error is combined with a high grade, especially if it receives a top-tier certification from a major grading service, since authentication and encapsulation are essential when values climb into the stratosphere. The legends surrounding the 1982 cent have also been amplified by stories of collectors who searched rolls for years, weighed thousands of pennies, and finally uncovered something extraordinary, reinforcing the idea that these treasures are still out there, hiding in jars, drawers, and old collections, waiting for the right person to recognize their significance. What truly makes the 1982 1 cent so valuable in theory is not just one single error, but the convergence of historical context, metal transition chaos, documented anomalies, and the tantalizing possibility of a unique or nearly unique survivor that challenges official mint records, because in numismatics, rarity combined with a compelling story can push values far beyond what logic alone would suggest. And when collectors compete for a coin that represents a once-in-a-generation opportunity, prices can soar to unimaginable heights. The $368 million figure often cited in dramatic discussions represents the ultimate extreme, a hypothetical valuation for a perfect storm discovery, a coin that is undeniably real, unquestionably unique, and universally recognized as one of the greatest mint errors of all time. And while most 1982 cents are worth only face value, the dream persists because history has shown again and again that impossible coins sometimes do exist, and when they do, they redefine the hobby. This is why checking your change matters, why weighing, examining, and understanding these coins is so important, and why the 1982 1 cent continues to capture the imagination of collectors around the world, because it represents hope, mystery, and the idea that even the smallest, most overlooked coin can carry a story and a value beyond belief. So the next time you come across a worn Lincoln cent with a small d under the date and the year 1982 stamped above Lincoln's shoulder, remember that. You might be holding more than a penny, you might be holding a piece of one of the most complex chapters in U.S. minting history, a coin born from urgency and transition, shaped by human error and mechanical imperfection, and elevated by the endless curiosity of collectors who refuse to stop searching for the next great discovery. Next, 1973 1 cent USA coin. Today we're diving into one of the most fascinating and jaw-dropping stories in modern numismatics, a story that proves why you should always look twice at the pennies you carry, because the 1973 1 cent has become legendary among collectors for the incredible errors, minting mistakes, and rare possibilities that have driven some examples to an almost unbelievable estimated value reaching as high as $312 million. And while that number sounds shocking, the reasons behind it are rooted in how rare mint errors are created, how few survive, and how demand explodes when the right combination of mistakes comes together on a single coin. So settle in, stay curious, and imagine that the next time you hear the clink of copper in your pocket, it might just be a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. The 1973 Lincoln cent was produced at the Denver Mint during a time when the U.S. Mint was under massive pressure, inflation was rising, copper prices were unstable, and production quotas were aggressive, which is often the perfect storm for mistakes to happen, because when speed meets volume, quality control sometimes slips, And those slips are exactly what collectors dream about decades later. While millions upon millions of normal 1973 pennies were struck and circulated, the true value monsters come from a very tiny group that escaped the mint with dramatic errors that should never have happened, including rare transitional metal planchets, extreme die errors, misaligned strikes, doubled dies, off-metal strikes, and even experimental alloy possibilities that were never intended for circulation. One of the most talked about possibilities is the chance that a 1973 cent was struck on an experimental or transitional planchet, which would be extraordinary because the early 1970s were a chaotic period for penny composition, with the mint experimenting with aluminum and other materials due to soaring copper prices. And although aluminum cents are most famously associated with 1974, planchet contamination and accidental mixing could have occurred earlier, meaning a genuine 1973 cent struck on an unauthorized or undocumented experimental metal would be one of the rarest U.S. coins ever known, instantly placing it in the realm of museum-level artifacts and private collector legends. Another massive value driver is a genuine double die obverse or reverse with extreme, unmistakable doubling visible to the naked eye, not machine doubling but true hub doubling created during the die-making process. And if a 1973 cent were discovered with dramatic doubling on the date, Liberty, or In God We Trust, combined with strong preservation and original surfaces, it would immediately become one of the most important Lincoln cent varieties ever discovered, especially since major double die varieties from the Denver Mint are far rarer than those from Philadelphia. Add to that the possibility of a multiple strike error, where the coin was struck more than once without properly ejecting from the press, resulting in overlapping designs, rotated impressions, or partial second strikes, and suddenly you have a visual spectacle that error collectors are willing to fight fiercely over, driving auction prices into territory that seems unreal to casual observers. Then, there are off-center strikes, which may sound common at first, but when the off-center percentage is dramatic, the date is fully visible, and the coin remains uncirculated or nearly so, the value skyrockets. And if such an error is paired with another mistake like a broad strike or a clipped planchet, the rarity multiplies rather than adds, which is why the most valuable error coins are often those with 2 or 3 major mistakes layered onto a single piece of metal. The 1973 cent is also known for the possibility of wrong planchet errors, where a penny blank intended for another denomination or another country is accidentally fed into the press. And if a Lincoln cent design appears on a planchet mint for a dime, a foreign coin, or an entirely different metal composition, the result is a coin that simply should not exist, making it one of the most desirable discoveries a collector could ever make. Another factor that feeds into the astronomical valuation stories surrounding the 1973 cent is condition rarity, because even common coins become uncommon when found in perfect or near-perfect state, and when an already rare error is preserved in pristine condition, untouched by circulation, scratches, or cleaning, the value curve goes nearly vertical, as top-tier collectors compete not just for ownership, but for bragging rights, registry set dominance, and the prestige of holding a coin that might never appear on the market again. Some of the most extreme valuations discussed among advanced collectors come from theoretical, perfect storm examples. A 1973 cent struck on an unauthorized experimental planchet, with a strong double die, a misaligned or off-center strike, and preserved in mint state condition, which would represent such an improbable convergence of factors that the coin would instantly become a singular object, something that auction houses would promote globally, museums would request for display, and private collectors would quietly negotiate for years, potentially justifying values that sound more like fine art or rare gemstones than a humble penny. The Denver Mint's role in this story is critical because Denver coins often saw heavier production runs and sometimes less public attention than Philadelphia issues, meaning certain errors could slip through unnoticed for years, hiding in jars, drawers, and forgotten collections until someone with a trained eye finally recognizes what they have. And that delayed discovery is part of what fuels the excitement around searching rolls of pennies even today. The psychological side of coin collecting also plays a role in why values climb so high, because when a coin becomes famous, when stories circulate about record-breaking prices and once-in-a-generation finds, demand intensifies, and demand is the engine that drives any market, especially one where supply is effectively fixed at one or just a handful of examples. Authentication is another critical element, because only coins verified by top grading services and recognized experts can command world-class prices, and a genuine 1973D error cent that checks every box would go through microscopic examination, metallurgical testing, die state analysis, and historical research, all of which add credibility and narrative weight to the coin, turning it from an object into a documented piece of history. It's also important to understand that not every 1973D penny is valuable, and most are worth only face value. But the reason collectors keep searching is because the few extraordinary pieces that do exist rewrite what we think is possible, reminding us that even the smallest denomination can hold enormous stories and staggering value when rarity, error, and demand collide. The legends surrounding the 1973D cent continue to grow as more collectors share photos, discoveries, and theories, and every time a new error is confirmed, it reignites the hunt, inspiring people around the world to check their change, inherited collections, and old coin jars with fresh excitement. Ultimately, the tale of the 1973D 1 cent potentially costing $312 million isn't just about a price tag, it's about the mystery of how coins are made, the imperfections that slip through massive systems, and the thrill of knowing that history doesn't always sit behind museum glass. Sometimes it hides in plain sight, waiting for the right person to notice, and that's why this coin, with all its errors, mistakes, and incredible possibilities, continues to captivate collectors, fuel dreams, and prove that in the world of numismatics, even a simple penny can become priceless. Next, 2010 1 cent USA coin. Today we are diving deep into the astonishing legend of the 2010 1 cent coin that has been talked about in collector circles as a potential $234 million rarity, a number that sounds absolutely impossible for a coin so recent. Yet, when you understand how errors, minting mistakes, experimental materials, transitional issues, and undocumented anomalies can combine into a perfect storm of rarity, the story becomes one of the most fascinating modern coin mysteries ever discussed, because the 2010 Lincoln cent was produced during a time of massive change, pressure, and experimentation at the United States Mint, a period when cost-cutting, metal composition concerns, die fatigue, and high-speed production all collided, opening the door for mistakes that were never meant to leave the mint, let alone enter circulation, and this is exactly where the intrigue begins. Because while billions of normal 2010 cents were struck, the possibility of a tiny handful being struck on the wrong metal, with the wrong dies, under the wrong pressure, or during undocumented test runs is what fuels the idea of values reaching astronomical levels, especially when collectors imagine a unique or nearly unique survivor emerging from circulation decades later. And one of the most talked about possibilities surrounding the 2010 cent is a wrong planchet error involving experimental alloys. As the mint has a long history of quietly testing alternative metals behind the scenes, particularly after the soaring copper prices of the late 2000s made cent production increasingly expensive, and although officially the 2010 cent was supposed to be zinc with a thin copper coating, the existence of transitional or experimental planchets struck accidentally is not beyond belief, especially when you consider past examples like the 1943 copper cent or the 1974 aluminum cent. Coins that were never supposed to exist yet today command legendary status, and if a 2010 cent were discovered struck on a solid copper planchet, a brass alloy, an aluminum-based composition, or even a foreign metal blank accidentally fed into the presses, the uniqueness alone could propel it into the stratosphere of numismatic value, particularly if metallurgical testing confirmed it was struck at the mint and not altered later. And then there is the possibility of a double denomination or wrong design strike, where a cent planchet is struck by a die intended for another coin, or a mismatched die pairing occurs. Something that sounds far-fetched but has happened before in U.S. mint history, creating coins that defy logic and drive collectors wild. And imagine a 2010 cent bearing a partial or full design from another denomination, or an extreme off-center strike combined with a dramatic die misalignment, creating a one-of-a-kind visual anomaly that instantly becomes the centerpiece of advanced collections. And beyond planchet errors, the 2010 cent era is notorious for die deterioration and die fatigue. Because the zinc cores with thin copper plating are extremely hard on dies, leading to rapid wear, cracks, breaks, and distortions. And while most die deterioration reduces value, in extreme cases it can create dramatic and identifiable errors such as massive cut breaks, retained cut formations, shattered dies, or ghost-like design elements that look almost melted into the surface. And when such errors are paired with pristine preservation, full original surfaces, and verifiable mint origin, they become exponentially more desirable, especially when only one or two examples are known. And then there are doubled dies, one of the most beloved and hunted error types in all of numismatics, caused when a die receives multiple misaligned impressions from the hub. And while most doubled dies are minor, a strong doubled die obverse or reverse on a modern set can still create huge excitement. And if a previously unknown class of doubling were discovered on a 2010 set with dramatic separation visible to the naked eye, collectors would immediately scramble to authenticate it, and if population reports showed it to be unique or nearly unique, its value could skyrocket beyond conventional expectations, particularly if combined with another error like an off-metal strike or broad strike. And speaking of broad strikes, the absence or malfunction of the collar during striking can produce a coin that spreads outward beyond normal dimensions, often with distorted legends and rims. And while many broad strikes exist, an extreme example with flawless surfaces, sharp details, and an unusual diameter could elevate it from curiosity to icon. And another fascinating avenue of possibility involves mule errors, where mismatched obverse and reverse dies from different years or denominations are paired together. And while extremely rare, mules are among the most valuable errors ever produced. And a 2010 cent mule involving an unexpected reverse design, or even a die from another series entirely, would instantly become one of the most important modern era coins ever discovered, commanding attention from museums, auction houses, and elite collectors worldwide. And then there is the topic of missing or altered mint marks, which in the modern era are part of the die rather than punched separately, but die-fill, grease-filled dies, or die damage can result in missing or distorted elements that create collectible varieties. And while a missing mint mark alone is not worth millions, when combined with other major errors and extreme rarity, it adds another layer to the story. And let's not forget strike-through errors, where foreign materials such as grease, cloth fibers, metal shavings, or even fragments of other planchets become trapped between the die and the coin during striking, leaving behind dramatic impressions that freeze a moment of chaos in metal. And a large, well-defined strike-through on a 2010 cent, especially one involving an unusual material, could be a key diagnostic feature that sets a coin apart from every other known example. And condition plays a massive role in value, because a flawless, uncirculated, untouched coin with blazing original luster and sharp details will always command exponentially more than a damaged or circulated piece. And when you combine top-tier condition with a once-in-a-generation error, the numbers begin to escalate into territory that sounds unbelievable to the average person. And the idea of a $234 million Dollar value is rooted not in everyday market prices but in the concept of absolute uniqueness, historical importance, and the psychology of elite collectors who compete fiercely for the rarest known objects, because in numismatics, value is not just about age, it is about story, mystery, and the impossibility of replacement, and a coin that represents a minting mistake that should never have happened. Discovered against all odds in circulation, authenticated by the top grading services, and publicized as the only known example of its kind, can transcend normal pricing logic, becoming a symbol of modern numismatic legend. And this is why searching through rolls of 2010 cents, bank boxes, and even old jars of change remains exciting, because while the odds are astronomical, history has shown time and time again that incredible rarities do slip through the cracks, sometimes waiting decades before being recognized, and collectors who understand weight differences, magnetic properties, edge details, sound tests, and microscopic diagnostics are the ones most likely to spot something extraordinary, and even a slightly heavier or lighter scent than normal can be the first clue that something is not right, leading to further testing and eventual discovery, and this constant possibility is what keeps the hobby alive and thrilling, because every coin tells a story. But a tiny handful tell stories, so shocking that they rewrite what we believe is possible, and the 2010 1 cent stands as a reminder that even in the modern era of advanced technology and strict quality control, mistakes still happen, and when they do, they create the potential for life-changing finds. And whether or not a $234 million example ever officially emerges, the hunt itself fuels imagination, education, and passion, encouraging collectors to slow down, look closer, and appreciate the incredible complexity behind even the smallest denomination. Next, 1978 D1 cent USA coin. I'm truly excited to have you here today because what you are about to hear could completely change the way you look at ordinary pocket change. And if you love coin collecting, hidden history, and the thrill of unbelievable discoveries, you're absolutely in the right place on the Coins Explorer, where we dive deep into rare coins, shocking errors, and unbelievable values. And today's story centers around one of the most misunderstood and underestimated Lincoln cents ever made, the 1978 D1 cent, a coin that most people have spent without a second thought, yet one that has ignited massive speculation, intense collector demand, and jaw-dropping valuations rumored as high as $185 million when the right combination of errors, mint mistakes, and extraordinary circumstances come together, because while a normal 1978 D penny is common and worth only face value, the magic happens when we look beyond the surface and explore how minting errors, transitional anomalies, metal composition irregularities, and die varieties can transform a humble copper cent into a once-in-a-lifetime numismatic phenomenon, starting with the era itself. Since 1978 was a pivotal year for the United States Mint as it stood on the brink of major changes in coin composition, especially for the Lincoln cent, which would officially shift from mostly copper to copper-plated zinc in 1982, and during periods like this, mistakes happen, experimental blanks circulate internally. Wrong planchets can be fed into presses, dies can be overused or improperly prepared, and quality control can falter, especially at high-output mints like Denver, which struck hundreds of millions of cents that year, creating the perfect storm for rare errors to slip through unnoticed and escape into circulation. And one of the most valuable and talked about possibilities involves the wrong metal composition error, where a 1978 D cent could theoretically be struck on an experimental or leftover bronze planchet of an incorrect alloy, or even a foreign planchet of similar size, resulting in a coin with a weight and metallic signature that does not match any standard issue. And if such a piece were authenticated, unique, and tied to internal mint experimentation or undocumented transitional testing, its value could skyrocket into unimaginable territory, because collectors place enormous premiums on coins that should not exist at all, especially when only one example is known, and building on that idea. Another extreme value scenario comes from the possibility of a double denomination or wrong planchet strike involving a higher denomination blank, such as a cent struck on a dime or even quarter planchet, which would show dramatic off-metal characteristics, weak or missing design elements, and unusual coloration, all of which would immediately attract global attention if confirmed and graded. And then there are die errors, which are often underestimated but can be just as powerful in creating legendary coins, particularly when we talk about major double die obverse or reverses where the date, mintmark, lettering, and Lincoln's portrait show bold, clearly separated doubling caused by a misaligned die during hubbing, and while minor doubling is common and often dismissed, a strong, dramatic double die on a Denver issue from 1978 would be extraordinarily rare, especially if it affected multiple design elements and remained unknown for decades, because newly discovered varieties tend to ignite bidding wars among top collectors who want to own the discovery coin, and if such a double die also displayed additional errors like die cracks, cuds, or clash marks, the value would compound even further. And speaking of die cracks and cuds, these dramatic mint errors can transform a normal penny into a unique piece of mint history, particularly when large sections of the die break away, leaving raised blobs of metal on the coin that distort the design in bizarre and fascinating ways. And when those breaks occur late in a die's life, they can create massive retained cuds or full rim breaks that are instantly visible, making the coin unmistakable and highly desirable, especially if the error is spectacular, well preserved, and paired with a rare date and mint combination like a Denver cent from a high production year where such dramatic failures were not expected to survive. And another factor that pushes the 1978 D cent into legendary territory is the possibility of a mintmark anomaly, since during this era, mintmarks were still punched into the working dies by hand, which opens the door for overpunched mintmarks, repunched mintmarks, misplaced mintmarks, or even missing mintmarks. And while missing mintmarks are more famous on Philadelphia issues, a severely misplaced or multiple punch D mintmark that is bold, unusual, and previously undocumented could create a standout rarity, especially if combined with other errors like doubling or off-center strikes. And off-center strikes themselves are another fascinating category, because if a planchet is not seated properly during striking, the resulting coin can show dramatic blank areas while still retaining a readable date and mintmark. And when the off-center percentage is extreme yet identifiable, collectors pay huge premiums, especially if the coin remains in high grade with strong eye appeal. And then there are broad strikes, where the collar fails to contain the planchet, causing the coin to spread outward and lose its defined rim, resulting in a wider, flatter appearance that can look almost metal-like. And while many broad strikes exist, a perfectly preserved, unusually wide example from 1978 D could become a centerpiece coin, particularly if paired with other anomalies like weak strikes or die fatigue. And we cannot overlook the role of condition rarity in pushing values into the stratosphere, because even a relatively minor error can become exponentially more valuable if it exists in pristine mint state condition with blazing original luster, no post-mint damage, and strong eye appeal. And when we talk about a hypothetical $185 million valuation, we are not talking about an everyday error, but rather a perfect storm scenario where a 1978 D cent combines multiple extreme factors, such as a wrong metal planchet, a dramatic double die, a major die break, and top-tier preservation, all authenticated by leading grading services, and recognized as unique or nearly unique within the numismatic community. And in such cases, the coin transcends being just a collectible and becomes a historic artifact, representing a moment when the minting process went spectacularly wrong in just the right way. And history has shown us time and time again that coins once dismissed as pocket change can later become icons of the hobby. As seen with other legendary errors and transitional issues, that now command millions at auction. And what fuels this fire even more is the fact that many 1978 D cents are still out there, sitting in jars, drawers, rolls, and old collections, untouched and unexamined, meaning the next great discovery could still be waiting for someone with patience, knowledge, and a keen eye. And that's why collectors are encouraged to check weight, look for unusual color, inspect details under magnification, and never assume a common date is truly common until it has been carefully evaluated, because the line between ordinary and extraordinary in coin collecting is often razor thin, and one overlooked detail can be the difference between a penny and a fortune. And as awareness grows and more collectors re-examine coins from transitional periods, like the late 1970s, the potential for new discoveries only increases, keeping the dream alive that a 1978 D1 cent with the right combination of errors and mistakes could one day shatter expectations and rewrite record books. And that is what makes this hobby so thrilling, unpredictable, and endlessly fascinating, because every coin has a story, and sometimes that story is worth far more than anyone ever imagined. Next, 1987 1 cent USA coin. I'm truly excited to have you here today because what we're about to explore will completely change the way you look at ordinary pocket change. And if you love the thrill of hidden treasure, mystery, and the possibility that a simple penny could be worth more than a mansion, a private jet, or even a small island, then you are absolutely in the right place. Because today we're diving deep into the incredible story of the 1987 1 cent coin that has been rumored, discussed, debated, and dreamed about in collector circles as a potential $161 million penny, a coin that on the surface looks ordinary, common, and easily ignored. Yet beneath that copper-plated zinc exterior lies a world of rare minting errors, unusual production mistakes, experimental possibilities, and once-in-a-lifetime anomalies that could transform a single cent into a generational fortune. And as we begin this journey, it's important to remember that millions of pennies were produced in 1987 at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints, during a time when the United States Mint was still refining its modern copper-plated zinc composition that had replaced solid copper just a few years earlier. And this transitional era alone opened the door for countless striking problems, metal planchet mishaps, die preparation flaws, and quality control oversights that today fuel some of the most jaw-dropping valuations in modern numismatics. Because when something goes wrong at the mint in just the right way, and only a tiny number of coins escape into circulation, rarity collides with demand and value can skyrocket beyond imagination. And one of the most talked about possibilities behind the legendary value of a 1987 1 cent is the existence of wrong planchet errors, where a penny is struck on a metal disc never intended for that denomination, such as a dime planchet, a foreign planchet, or even experimental alloy stock that was never meant to leave the mint. And if a confirmed 1987 cent were discovered struck on an unauthorized or transitional metal with full design details, correct weight anomalies, and verified mint origin, the numismatic world would erupt, because such a coin would not just be rare, it would be unique, and uniqueness is what drives prices into the tens or hundreds of millions when elite collectors compete. Another powerful factor comes from double die errors, which occur when the die used to strike the coin receives multiple misaligned impressions during its creation, resulting in dramatic doubling visible on dates, letters, Lincoln's profile, or the reverse inscriptions. And while minor doubling is common, a strong, clearly separated double die obverse or reverse on a 1987 penny with bold visual impact and pristine preservation would instantly become one of the most desirable modern era coins in existence, especially if only one or two examples were known, pushing auction estimates into uncharted territory. Then there are off-metal and missing layer errors unique to the copper-plated zinc era, where the thin copper coating partially or completely separates from the zinc core, creating blistered surfaces, exposed gray metal, or even dramatic peel-away effects that reveal the inner structure of the coin. And while many of these errors exist in lower grades, a perfectly preserved Bull Strike 1987 cent with an extreme missing plating error or bonded layer anomaly could be the finest known example, a status that alone can multiply value exponentially, and collectors obsess over finest known designations because they represent the absolute peak of rarity and condition. Another extraordinary possibility involves mule errors, where mismatched dies are paired together accidentally, such as a penny obverse struck with a die intended for another denomination or year. And although mules are exceptionally rare, when they occur they are among the most valuable mint errors ever discovered, and a confirmed 1987 Lincoln said mule involving an incorrect reverse or experimental die would instantly become a numismatic legend, with museums and billionaires lining up to own it, adding fuel to the idea of nine-figure valuations. Then we have broad strike errors, where the coin is struck without a retaining collar, allowing metal to spread outward, creating oversized coins with distorted rims. And while common broad strikes aren't extremely valuable, an extreme broad strike combined with other errors such as off-center strikes, die rotation, or double denomination features can elevate a coin into a category so rare that price becomes whatever a buyer is willing to pay. And speaking of off-center strikes, a dramatically off-center 1987 penny that still shows a complete date, mint mark if applicable, and strong design elements can be worth staggering sums when paired with pristine condition and unique characteristics, especially if the error percentage is visually dramatic and aesthetically striking. Another layer of mystery surrounds the possibility of experimental or test strikes during 1987, as the mint constantly tested alloys, plating thicknesses, and production techniques behind the scenes. And while most experimental pieces were supposed to be destroyed, history has shown time and time again that some escaped, intentionally or accidentally, and when discovered decades later, they rewrite price guides overnight. And if a 1987 1 cent were proven to be an unauthorized experimental strike with documentation, metallurgical analysis, and certification, it would stand as a once-in-a-lifetime discovery, something that transcends normal collecting and enters the realm of cultural artifact, where 7- or 8-figure prices are no longer shocking, but expected. Then, there are die cap errors, where a coin sticks to the die and repeatedly strikes other planchets, forming a cap-like shape with ghostly impressions. And while many die caps exist, a dramatic early-stage die cap from 1987 with clear design details and minimal damage would be a showstopper at any auction, particularly if paired with a known provenance or discovery story that adds emotional weight and historical intrigue. And let's not forget clash dies, where obverse and reverse dies strike each other without a planchet in between, leaving mirror image impressions that can later transfer onto coins. And while light clashes are common, heavy, visually bold clash dies on a 1987 penny with dramatic overlapping details could command enormous interest, especially if combined with other errors like doubling or rotation. Rotation errors themselves are another avenue of value, where the obverse and reverse are misaligned, sometimes by extreme degrees, and a full 180-degree rotated die error on a 1987 cent in mint state condition would already be rare. But if that rotation were paired with another major error, the coin would become exponentially more valuable, and condition plays a massive role in all of this, because errors are exciting, but errors in flawless or near-flawless condition are where money explodes, and a 1987 penny with multiple major errors preserved in mint state or proof-like condition would attract the attention of the world's most powerful collectors, investors, and institutions, people who view such coins not just as collectibles, but as portable wealth, historical artifacts, and status symbols. And when multiple billionaires want the same irreplaceable object, numbers like $161 million stop sounding impossible, they start sounding inevitable, especially when you consider that modern coins are often dismissed and overlooked, meaning that undiscovered treasures could still be sitting in jars, rolls, or old collections, waiting for someone with a sharp eye and curiosity to notice something slightly off, something heavier or lighter than normal, something misaligned, doubled, missing, or simply strange. And that sense of possibility is what keeps collectors searching through thousands of coins, because history has proven that the biggest discoveries often come from the most ordinary places, and the 1987 1 cent embodies that spirit perfectly, a coin born in the modern era, dismissed by most, yet potentially hiding secrets that could rival the most famous rarities of the past. And as stories circulate, rumors grow, and collectors continue to examine their change with magnifiers and scales. The legend of the 1987 penny worth $161 million continues to inspire, not because every 1987 cent is valuable. Next, 1996 1 cent USA coin. Everyday pocket change turns into unbelievable treasure, and hidden stories come to life. And today we are diving deep into one of the most mysterious and talked about modern Lincoln cents ever, the 1996 1 cent coin that has stunned collectors with stories of unbelievable errors, mint mistakes, and extreme possibilities that have pushed its rumored value as high as $111 million. A figure so shocking that it sounds unreal. Yet the world of rare coin collecting has proven, time and again, that a tiny piece of copper can rewrite financial history when the right combination of rarity, condition, and mint chaos collide. Because 1996 was not just another ordinary year for pennies, it was a time when production pressures, aging equipment, experimental metal behavior, and overlooked quality control moments created a perfect storm of anomalies that may still be hiding today in jars, drawers, and forgotten rolls across the country. And as we explore this coin, you will understand why seasoned collectors never dismiss a single cent, because the smallest difference can turn a face value coin into a generational fortune, starting with the fact that 1996 Lincoln cents were produced in massive quantities at multiple mints, including Philadelphia and Denver. And while that might suggest commonality, it actually increases the probability that rare mistakes slip through unnoticed, especially during high-speed minting where dies were pushed beyond their intended lifespan, causing subtle and dramatic errors alike. One of the most significant possibilities connected to the legendary value of a 1996 cent involves extreme die errors, such as advanced die deterioration that went far beyond normal wear, creating warped lettering, ghost-like doubling, and distorted facial features on Lincoln's portrait that are not simple machine doubling but true die doubling formed during hubbing, where misaligned impressions permanently alter the die itself. And when such errors occur on an already stressed die, the resulting coins can show dramatic spread in dates, mint marks, and inscriptions that become instantly recognizable to experts. Another major factor lies in off-metal strikes, a scenario where a 1996 penny could have been struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination or even a foreign coin. And while this sounds impossible, history has proven that wrong planchets do enter presses, and when they do, the resulting coin becomes a one-of-a-kind artifact, especially if the metal composition is exotic or undocumented, such as experimental alloys or transitional stock left behind from previous years. And when such a coin is authenticated and traced to a specific minting anomaly, its value can skyrocket into uncharted territory, especially if it is the only known example. Adding fuel to the speculation is the possibility of a double denomination error, where a planchet previously struck as another coin was accidentally struck again with a penny die, resulting in overlapping designs that defy conventional explanation and create visual chaos that collectors crave. And when combined with a pristine condition, such a coin could easily become the centerpiece of the numismatic world, pushing valuations into the realm of the unimaginable. Another key contributor to the staggering value discussion is the potential for missing or incorrect mint marks. As the mid-1990s saw transitional changes in minting procedures and quality control, and a missing or malformed mint mark on a coin that otherwise shows additional errors can exponentially increase its desirability, especially when paired with documentation proving it was not altered post-mint. And then, there are rotated die errors, where the obverse and reverse are misaligned far beyond acceptable tolerances, creating coins that appear twisted when flipped. A dramatic and rare occurrence that becomes even more valuable when rotation approaches extreme angles, because it demonstrates a fundamental breakdown in the minting process. Collectors also pay close attention to broad strikes, where the coin is struck without the retaining collar, allowing the metal to spread outward, producing a larger than normal coin with weak or missing rims. And while minor broad strikes are known, a perfectly centered extreme broad strike combined with other errors can become a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. The conversation around the 1996 penny's potential value also includes struck-through errors, where foreign materials such as grease, cloth fibers, metal shavings, or even fragments of other coins interfered with the strike, leaving mysterious voids, impressions, or textures that cannot be replicated. And when these struck-through errors are dramatic and well-defined, they tell a story of the mint floor frozen in time, a snapshot of chaos preserved in copper, and beyond physical errors. Condition plays a critical role, because a coin with multiple mint errors preserved in near-perfect state becomes exponentially more valuable than a circulated example, and when grading services encounter such a coin with blazing luster, sharp detail were present, and undeniable originality, the market reacts with intense demand, especially if the coin challenges existing knowledge and forces experts to revise assumptions about what is possible. Another aspect that fuels the extraordinary valuation rumors is the possibility of undiscovered prototype or experimental strikes, as the mint has historically tested different processes, pressures, and materials without public documentation. And if a 1996 cent were to surface showing metallurgical composition that does not match any known production standard, confirmed through scientific analysis, it would immediately become one of the most important coins ever found, because it would represent a missing chapter in mint history. And collectors, museums, and private investors would compete fiercely to own it, driving prices into territory normally reserved for the rarest gold coins and ancient artifacts. The psychology of the market also cannot be ignored, because once a coin is recognized as unique or nearly unique, its value is no longer anchored to metal content or even traditional rarity scales. It becomes a symbol, a legend, and a benchmark. And the 1996 penny has all the ingredients needed for such status: a common year hiding uncommon secrets, a humble denomination defying expectations, and the tantalizing possibility that more examples could still exist undiscovered, which keeps collectors searching endlessly, examining every detail under magnification, weighing coins, checking edges, and learning diagnostics, because the dream of finding a life-changing coin is powerful, and stories of past discoveries continue to inspire new ones. From doubled dies found in circulation to off-metal strikes pulled from bank rolls decades after minting. And this is why the 1996 1-cent coin commands such fascination, because it represents the idea that history is not finished, that mistakes made decades ago can resurface and rewrite lives, and that value is not always obvious at first glance. So whether the legendary $111 million valuation becomes reality through a confirmed discovery or remains a symbol of what is possible, the lesson remains the same. Never underestimate the potential of a single cent. Never stop learning the signs of true mint errors, and never assume that what you hold is ordinary, because the next great numismatic discovery could be waiting quietly in your pocket change right now. And here on this channel we explore those possibilities together, uncovering the hidden wealth and incredible stories locked inside the smallest coins, reminding everyone that sometimes the greatest treasures are the ones we overlook every day. Next, 2021 Lincoln Penny. A big warm welcome to everyone tuning in today on the Coins Explorer, the place where ordinary pocket change turns into extraordinary treasure stories. And in this episode, we are diving deep into one of the most shocking modern coin mysteries ever discussed in the numismatic world. The 2021 D1 cent that has stunned collectors with claims of values reaching as high as $89 million due to a perfect storm of rare errors, minting mistakes, transitional anomalies, and unbelievable possibilities that challenge everything people think they know about modern pennies, because most people assume that coins made in recent years can never be worth life-changing money. Yet, history keeps proving that it is not the age of a coin that matters, but the story behind how it was created. And the 2021 Lincoln cent minted in Denver sits at the center of intense speculation precisely because it was produced during a time of massive disruption, rushed production schedules, metal sourcing challenges, and heightened automation pressures that opened the door for errors that were never supposed to escape the mint, making this coin a fascinating symbol of how even the newest pennies can hide jaw-dropping value when the right combination of mistakes occurs, starting with the fact that 2021 cents were struck during an era of supply chain instability where planchet composition, thickness, and alloy consistency became a critical concern, raising the possibility that some 2021 D cents were accidentally struck on experimental, transitional, or improperly mixed blanks that differ subtly or dramatically from standard zinc or copper-plated planchets, and if a penny were confirmed to be struck on a wrong metal such as a copper alloy intended for another denomination, a foreign planchet, or a leftover test blank, the value could skyrocket instantly because modern wrong planchet errors are among the most aggressively hunted rarities in contemporary coin collecting, especially when tied to a specific mint like Denver, where massive output increases the odds that a few extreme anomalies slip through unnoticed. And when you combine that with dramatic weight differences, unusual ring sounds when dropped, or distinct coloration that does not match normal 2021 cents, you begin to see how an otherwise common-looking penny could turn into a multi-million-dollar legend. But composition alone is just the beginning, because some of the most valuable hypothetical 2021 D cents are believed to involve catastrophic die errors such as doubled dies that go far beyond ordinary machine doubling, including extreme hub doubling where the date, lettering, Lincoln's profile, and memorial or shield details appear separated, thickened, or ghosted in a way that cannot be replicated by post-mint damage. And if a dramatic double die obverse or reverse were discovered with strong separation visible without magnification, collectors would immediately recognize it as a once-in-a-generation find for a modern cent, particularly because the mint has become increasingly effective at catching these errors before release, making any that escape incredibly rare. And then, there is the possibility of die clashes so severe that elements from opposite sides of the coin appear boldly impressed into each other, creating surreal overlapping images that transform a simple penny into a numismatic artwork. And in extreme cases, these clashes can combine with misaligned dies, off-center strikes, or rotated dies, producing a coin that defies expectations and fuels headlines about values soaring into tens of millions, especially when such an error is unique or nearly unique, because uniqueness is one of the most powerful drivers of extreme valuation in the coin market. And speaking of misalignment, some rumored high-value 2021 D cents involve dramatic off-metal or off-center strikes where the design is partially missing yet perfectly preserved, showing large blank areas while still retaining full date and mintmark visibility. And when errors like this occur alongside other anomalies such as broad strikes without collars or partial collar strikes that create finned rims, the result is a visually stunning piece that collectors fight fiercely to own. But the story grows even more intriguing when you consider the possibility of mule errors, where mismatched dies intended for different coins are accidentally paired together. And while mule errors are extremely rare in the modern era, their discovery always sends shockwaves through the hobby, and if a 2021 D cent were found struck with an incorrect reverse design, a mismatched denomination, or an unintended experimental die, the value could instantly leap into legendary territory, because such a coin would represent a fundamental breakdown in mint quality control at the highest level. And that is exactly the kind of narrative that drives extraordinary auction results. Yet another layer of intrigue surrounds the idea of missing or distorted mintmarks, because although the D mintmark is part of the die for modern cents, severe grease-filled dies or die deterioration can cause the mintmark to appear faint, partially missing, or oddly shaped, and while minor examples are common, an extreme case combined with other major errors could create a perfect storm scenario that elevates the coin from curiosity to icon. And then, there is the ever-controversial topic of transitional errors, where a coin is struck using a design element, planchet, or production standard intended for a different year or experimental phase, and if the mint were testing new plating processes, metal mixtures, or die finishes in or around 2021, even a single confirmed transitional cent could become one of the most valuable modern coins ever known. Because collectors pay enormous premiums for coins that mark a moment of change in minting history, especially when documentation or metallurgical testing confirms the anomaly. Beyond doubt, and value estimates in the tens of millions often arise not from current sales, but from theoretical competition among elite collectors and institutions who desire ownership of a piece that no one else can have. And this is where the $89 million figure enters the conversation. Not as a casual price tag, but as a reflection of what could happen if a 2021 D cent were discovered with a combination of extreme errors such as wrong planchet composition, dramatic doubled dies, unique die states, and pristine condition all at once, because condition plays a massive role in modern era coin valuation, and a flawless uncirculated example with full mint luster, sharp details, and untouched surfaces would command exponentially more than a damaged or circulated counterpart, and this leads to the importance of authentication and grading, because no matter how incredible a coin appears, its true value can only be realized when it is examined by top-tier grading services that can verify its authenticity, composition, and error status. And once a coin is encapsulated with official recognition, it becomes eligible for elite auctions where wealthy collectors compete fiercely, often driving prices far beyond initial expectations. And it is worth noting that modern coins can achieve astonishing prices precisely because their rarity is unexpected, as most were saved in enormous numbers, making any true outlier stand out even more dramatically. And the 2021 D cent benefits from being produced during an era of unprecedented global disruption, which collectors believe increased the odds of minting anomalies slipping through unnoticed. And when you add the psychological factor of people still actively searching their pocket change, bank rolls, and mint sets, the legend of the $89 million penny continues to grow, inspiring countless treasure hunts and fueling the belief that life-changing discoveries can still happen today, not in dusty vaults or ancient hoards, but in everyday coins passed from hand to hand. And this is why examining 2021 D cents carefully matters, paying attention to weight differences, magnetic behavior, unusual colors, distorted lettering, missing details, and anything that feels even slightly off, because history has shown time and again that the most valuable coins often looked ordinary until someone took a closer look. And as the numismatic community continues to evolve, with advanced imaging, metallurgical analysis, and global communication among collectors, the chances of discovering and confirming an unprecedented error grows stronger. Next, 1986 1-cent USA coin. This is the place where everyday pocket change turns into unbelievable stories of hidden fortune, and today we are diving deep into one of the most talked about modern Lincoln cents, the 1986 1-cent coin, a penny that most people overlook, spin without thinking, or toss into a jar, yet under the right circumstances has been rumored, speculated, and passionately discussed among collectors as a potential $52 million treasure because of its rare errors, minting mistakes, metal anomalies, and once-in-a-lifetime combinations that could transform an ordinary copper-colored coin into a legendary discovery. And as we begin this journey together, it is important to understand that the 1986 penny sits at a fascinating crossroads in U.S. coinage history, a time when the mint was still adjusting to changes introduced earlier in the decade, particularly the switch in composition that occurred in 1982, when pennies moved from mostly copper to copper-plated zinc, and by 1986 both the Philadelphia and Denver mints were producing massive quantities of cents using high-speed presses, thinner planchets, and tighter production schedules, all of which created the perfect environment for mistakes to slip through unnoticed. Mistakes that today fuel stories of coins worth far more than their face value, and in extreme cases have inspired estimates that reach into the tens of millions of dollars when multiple rare factors collide in a single specimen. One of the most important possibilities with the 1986 cent involves transitional composition errors, because although by this time pennies were supposed to be copper-plated zinc, collectors know that leftover copper planchets from earlier years sometimes remained in the system. And if a 1986 penny were struck on an older solid copper planchet weighing around 3.11 grams instead of the standard 2.5 grams, it would immediately stand out as an off-metal error, and such transitional errors are among the most valuable mistakes in U.S. numismatics, especially when they occur outside the officially recognized transition years, because they challenge established mint records and force experts to re-examine what was truly happening on the production floor. And when combined with absolute pristine condition and strong documentation, values can skyrocket into the realm of multi-million-dollar discussions. Another major factor that drives the incredible valuation rumors surrounding the 1986 cent is the possibility of dramatic double-die errors, particularly double-die obverse varieties where the date, the word liberty, or the motto "In God We Trust" show clear, strong separation that can be seen even without magnification, and while minor doubling is common and usually worthless, true double dies created during the hubbing process are extremely rare, and a bold, undiscovered double die from a high mintage year like 1986 would electrify the collecting community, especially if it were paired with other anomalies such as a broad strike, an off-center strike, or a misaligned die, because collectors do not just pay for rarity, they pay for stories. And a coin that tells multiple stories at once becomes exponentially more desirable. One of the most fascinating and speculative possibilities that pushes the imagined value of a 1986 penny toward that $52 million figure is the concept of a perfect storm error, meaning a coin that combines several elite-level mistakes into one surviving example, such as being struck on the wrong metal, showing a dramatic double die, featuring a major die crack or retained cud, and surviving in flawless uncirculated or proof-like condition, something that seems almost impossible yet not entirely outside the realm of minting reality, because coins are struck by machines operated by humans, and history has shown again and again that when systems operate at massive scale, anomalies occur, and sometimes they slip through quality control and enter circulation unnoticed for decades. Another highly discussed error category for the 1986 cent involves wrong planchet strikes beyond copper, such as being struck on a dime, foreign coin, or experimental alloy planchet, and while extremely rare, wrong planchet errors are among the most valuable mistakes ever sold at auction, because they represent a fundamental breakdown in mint segregation procedures. And if a 1986 Lincoln cent were ever authenticated as being struck on an exotic or unintended metal, particularly one associated with high intrinsic value or historical significance, it would instantly become one of the most important error coins of the modern era, driving collectors, museums, and private investors into fierce competition, which is how valuations can escalate far beyond traditional price guides and into the realm of legendary sums. The Denver Mint version of the 1986 cent also carries its own unique set of possibilities, as the mintmark itself can become a focal point for errors such as repunched mintmarks, filled mintmarks, or mintmarks that appear doubled or misplaced due to die deterioration or misalignment. And while many of these are minor and common, an extreme example paired with other high-end errors could dramatically increase a coin's desirability, especially if it represents a previously undocumented variety, because in numismatics, discovery is value. And the first known example of something new often commands prices far beyond what later examples achieve. Die deterioration errors also play a significant role in the 1986 penny story, because the high mintage numbers meant dies were often pushed to their limits, resulting in cracks, chips, breaks, and cuts that can create dramatic visual effects. And while small cracks are common, a massive retained cud that alters the design in a visually striking way can transform a simple cent into a collectible centerpiece. And if such a feature appears early in the die's life combined with sharp details elsewhere, it suggests a unique moment in the die's failure that was captured only briefly before the die was retired. Another avenue of value speculation involves proof coins and special strikes, because proof pennies from 1986 were produced for collectors, and while most are common, a proof coin with a major mint error is exceptionally rare, as proof production involves greater quality control. And when a dramatic error escapes that process, it becomes a standout anomaly. And a proof 1986 cent struck on the wrong planchet or exhibiting a bold double die would be virtually unheard of, placing it into an elite category where price becomes whatever the highest bidder is willing to pay, especially if the coin is unique or one of only a handful known. Condition also plays a massive role in pushing values toward unimaginable heights, because a coin can be rare yet still relatively affordable if it is heavily worn or damaged. But when rarity meets perfection, prices explode. And a 1986 penny with extraordinary errors preserved in flawless condition, with blazing luster, sharp strikes, and no post-mint damage, would be a dream scenario for elite collectors, registry-set competitors, and institutions seeking headline-worthy acquisitions. And this is where the $52 million narrative truly takes shape, not as a typical market price, but as a hypothetical peak valuation driven by uniqueness, condition, demand, and the powerful psychology of ownership. The idea that someone could own the single most important 1986 Lincoln cent ever discovered, a coin that rewrites what we thought we knew about modern U.S. minting, and that emotional appeal cannot be overstated, because coins at that level are not just metal, they are artifacts, symbols, and investments rolled into one. And history has shown that when two or more wealthy collectors decide they must have the same unique object, logic often gives way to passion, resulting in prices that shock even seasoned experts. It is also important to understand that many of these ultra-high valuations exist in the realm of possibility rather than confirmed sales. But possibility is the fuel that drives searching, roll hunting, and careful examination of everyday change. And that is why the 1986 penny continues to capture attention, because millions were minted, meaning millions still exist. Meaning the next incredible discovery could theoretically be sitting in a forgotten jar, an old collection, or even in circulation, waiting for someone with a sharp eye and curiosity to notice an unusual weight, an odd color, a misaligned design, or doubled lettering that should not be there. And this sense of accessibility is what makes Lincoln cent collecting so powerful. Next, 1992 D Lincoln Penny. Today we are talking about the legendary 1992 D1 cent, a coin that looks ordinary at first glance, but has become famous for the jaw-dropping possibility that certain rare error versions could be worth up to $15 million, a value so shocking that it has turned this humble copper coin into a symbol of hidden fortune. And as we explore this story together, imagine holding a simple penny that could completely change your life, because that is exactly why millions of people are now paying closer attention to the smallest details on their coins, especially those minted in the early 1990s at the Denver Mint, a time when subtle production changes, high-speed minting, and overlooked mistakes created the perfect environment for extraordinary errors to slip through unnoticed. And the 1992 penny sits right at the center of this mystery, not because every example is rare, but because a tiny number of them may contain combinations of errors, transitional features, and striking anomalies that transform a 1-cent coin into a multi-million-dollar rarity. Starting with the basics, the 1992 1 cent was struck at the Denver Mint and features the familiar Lincoln Memorial design on the reverse and Abraham Lincoln on the obverse, and millions upon millions of these pennies were produced, flooding circulation and remaining common for decades, which is why most people never imagined they were worth more than face value. But what makes this coin special is not the date alone. It is the possibility of rare minting errors and unusual characteristics that should never have occurred, yet did, due to the intense pressure, worn dies, planchet inconsistencies, and occasional lapses in quality control that happen when the mint operates at massive scale. One of the most important and valuable possibilities surrounding the 1992 penny involves transitional errors, where design elements intended for one year or one type of coin appear on another, and collectors have long studied the early 1990s as a period of subtle transitions in die preparation and hubbing techniques. And while the famous close AM error is usually associated with Philadelphia Mint coins from 1992, some collectors believe that extremely rare Denver-struck examples with unexpected spacing anomalies or die varieties may exist, possibly struck using experimental or misprepared dies that were never meant for circulation. And if such a coin were discovered and verified, its value would instantly skyrocket due to its uniqueness and historical importance. Another powerful factor that drives the 1992 penny toward legendary status is the possibility of double die errors, which occur when the die used to strike the coin receives more than one misaligned impression during its creation, causing parts of the design, such as the date, lettering, or Lincoln's features, to appear doubled. And while minor doubling is relatively common and often worthless, true double die errors are extremely rare and highly collectible, especially when the doubling is bold and easily visible. And if a dramatic double die 1992 penny were to surface, particularly one affecting key design elements like the date or motto, it could become one of the most valuable Lincoln cents ever known, especially if it remains in high-grade condition. And condition itself plays a massive role in the potential value of any error coin, because a pristine, uncirculated example with full original luster and sharp details is exponentially more valuable than a worn or damaged one, which is why stories of multi-million-dollar pennies often involve coins that somehow survived decades without heavy circulation, perhaps pulled from mint sets, stored in rolls, or saved by someone who had no idea what they were holding. Another fascinating category of errors tied to the 1992 penny involves off-metal strikes, where the coin is struck on the wrong type of planchet, such as a blank intended for another denomination or even a foreign coin, and these errors are among the most dramatic and valuable in all of numismatics because they represent a complete breakdown in the minting process. And while off-metal errors are incredibly rare, when they do occur they create coins that defy expectations in weight, color, and composition, and a confirmed 1992 penny struck on the wrong planchet, especially if paired with other errors, would be considered a once-in-a-lifetime discovery, pushing its value into the realm of museum pieces and elite private collections. Adding to the intrigue are strike-related errors such as broad strikes, where the coin is struck without the retaining collar causing it to spread outward, or off-center strikes, where the design is not properly aligned on the planchet. And while many off-center coins are collectible but not priceless, extreme examples with dramatic misalignment combined with a clear date and mint mark can command huge premiums, particularly if the error is visually stunning and immediately recognizable even to non-collectors. And when multiple errors appear on the same coin, known as a mule of mistakes by some enthusiasts, the value increases exponentially because the probability of such a combination occurring is astronomically low. Another important element in the 1992 penny legend involves die cracks, cuds, and retained die breaks, which occur when the die begins to fail after repeated use, leaving raised lines, blobs, or missing design elements on the struck coin. And while minor die cracks are common, massive die breaks that dramatically alter the appearance of the coin are rare and highly sought after, and a 1992 penny with a large cut affecting Lincoln's portrait or the memorial could become a standout error that attracts intense bidding from collectors who specialize in dramatic mint errors. The story becomes even more compelling when you consider the role of human error and mechanical stress during the minting process, because the Denver Mint in the early 1990s was producing coins at an incredible pace to meet demand, and when production ramps up, quality control sometimes takes a back seat to speed, allowing coins with significant defects to escape detection, and these escaped errors are exactly what collectors dream of finding, because they represent a frozen moment of chaos in an otherwise precise industrial process. And the 1992 penny stands as a symbol of that possibility, a reminder that even in a highly controlled environment, perfection is not guaranteed. And then there is the element of speculation and mystery that fuels the idea of a $15 million value, because in the world of rare coins, value is not determined by metal content or face value, but by rarity, demand, historical significance, and the story behind the coin. And if a truly unique 1992 penny were discovered, such as one with an undocumented transitional reverse, an extreme double die, or an unprecedented combination of errors, it would immediately become the subject of intense media attention, scholarly debate, and competitive bidding among wealthy collectors. And in such scenarios, prices can reach astonishing heights because the coin is not just an object, it is a piece of history that can never be replicated, and this is why experts always emphasize the importance of professional authentication and grading, because extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and a potential multimillion-dollar penny must be examined by top grading services to confirm its legitimacy, errors, and condition. But that process itself adds to the allure, because the journey from pocket change to record-breaking auction piece is as thrilling as the final result. And for everyday people watching these stories unfold, the message is both exciting and empowering, because it suggests that hidden treasures may still be out there, sitting in jars, drawers, or rolls of pennies, waiting for someone curious enough to look closely. And the 1992 penny has inspired countless collectors to examine their coins with fresh eyes, learning about mint marks, error types, and grading standards, turning a simple hobby into a passionate quest for discovery. And even if the odds of finding a $15 million penny are incredibly slim, the thrill of the hunt and the knowledge gained along the way make the search worthwhile, because every coin tells a story, and sometimes that story leads to unimaginable value. And as you think about the 1992 1 cent, remember that its legend is built on possibility, on the idea that rarity can hide in plain sight, and that history does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it whispers through tiny details that most people overlook, and that is what makes coin collecting last. 1991 1 cent USA coin. The hidden history meets real money, and where everyday pocket change can turn into life-changing treasure. And today we're diving deep into one of the most fascinating Lincoln cent stories ever told, as we explore how a seemingly ordinary 1991 1 cent coin has captured attention across the numismatic world with whispers, theories, discoveries, and documented error possibilities that have pushed its potential value into the astonishing $11 million range, a figure that sounds unbelievable until you understand how rare minting mistakes, transitional anomalies, striking errors, and condition rarity can align perfectly in a single coin. Because the 1991 penny was produced in massive numbers at the Philadelphia and Denver mints during a time when the U.S. Mint was operating at high speed with aging equipment, tight production deadlines, and overlapping die usage, which created the perfect environment for mistakes that were never supposed to escape into circulation. Yet some did, and those few survivors are what collectors dream about finding in old jars, inherited collections, or even rolls pulled straight from the bank. And the first major factor behind the 1991 1-cent's massive potential value lies in dramatic off-metal errors, where pennies intended to be struck on copper-plated zinc planchets were instead accidentally struck on foreign blanks, experimental alloys, or leftover bronze planchets from earlier years, creating coins that instantly stand out by weight, sound, color, and composition. And while the mint officially transitioned away from bronze in 1982, stray bronze planchets have been discovered in later years, and a confirmed 1991 cent struck on a genuine pre-1982 bronze blank would already command staggering sums. But when paired with pristine condition and authentication, its value multiplies exponentially due to extreme rarity and intense collector competition. Then, there are the transitional error possibilities involving incorrect die pairings or mismatched obverse and reverse dies that were never meant to be used together, including rare doubled dies where the hoving process caused strong, visible doubling on Lincoln's portrait, the date, or the lettering, and unlike machine doubling, true doubled dies show separation, thickness, and notching that cannot be replicated. And a dramatic double die obverse or reverse on a 1991 cent in high mint state condition would instantly place it among elite error coins, especially if the doubling FX key design elements that remain sharp and untouched by circulation wear. Another major contributor to the $11 million narrative is the possibility of wrong mintmark anomalies, including misplaced, repunched, or even missing mintmarks combined with other errors. Since 1991 was one of the final years before mintmarks were standardized into the master die process, meaning manual mintmark punching was still in play, opening the door for dramatic mistakes, such as doubled mintmarks, inverted mintmarks, or mintmarks punched over remnants of older punches. And when these appear on coins that also exhibit die cracks, die clashes, or rotated dies, the compounded rarity drives collector demand into unprecedented territory. Speaking of die clashes, the 1991 cent offers another fascinating avenue of value through severe die clash errors where obverse and reverse dies struck each other without a planchet between them, transferring portions of the opposite design onto the wrong side of the coin. And when these clash marks are bold, undisturbed, and paired with early die state surfaces showing no excessive polishing, they become visual proof of a dramatic minting accident frozen in time, and collectors pay enormous premiums for such pieces, especially when they remain in uncirculated condition with full original luster. Then there's the legendary realm of struck-through errors, where grease, debris, cloth, or even metal fragments interfered with the strike, leaving missing design elements or ghostly impressions that make each coin completely unique. And in rare cases, multiple struck-through events occurred on a single coin, creating a one-of-a-kind artifact that cannot be duplicated. And uniqueness is a powerful driver of value in the numismatic market, especially when combined with a popular series like the Lincoln cent that attracts both beginner and advanced collectors alike. The 1991 penny also sits at a crossroads of modern and classic collecting, which means that condition rarity plays an enormous role in its potential value, because while millions were minted, almost all entered circulation and were heavily used, making true gem examples extraordinarily difficult to find. And when a 1991 cent survives with flawless surfaces, razor-sharp details, blazing red color, and absolutely no contact marks, it becomes a condition census standout. And when such a coin also carries a major mint error, the bidding wars among high-end collectors can escalate into jaw-dropping figures, especially when registry-set competitors are involved and money becomes secondary to ownership. Another overlooked but critical factor is die variety research, where subtle differences in lettering spacing, numeral shapes, and design alignment reveal previously undocumented varieties that can explode in value once recognized. And history has shown time and again that newly discovered varieties often start quietly before surging to record prices as awareness spreads and demand outpaces supply, and the 1991 set remains fertile ground for discovery because many collectors overlooked modern pennies for decades, meaning undiscovered treasures could still be hiding in plain sight. Then there's the possibility of experimental or test strikes, which, although never officially released, occasionally slipped out of the mint during periods of alloy testing or die experimentation. And if a genuine 1991 experimental cent were authenticated, its historical significance alone could justify a multi-million-dollar valuation due to its connection to mint technology and policy decisions. And let's not forget dramatic strike errors such as broad strikes without collars, extreme off-center strikes showing full dates, multiple strikes with rotation between impressions, or coins struck through capped dies that leave in use distorted designs, all of which turn ordinary cents into visual spectacles that collectors are willing to pay staggering sums for when rarity, eye appeal, and authenticity converge. The story of the 1991 1-cent potential $11 million value is not about every penny from that year being worth a fortune, but about the perfect storm of rarity, mistake, preservation, and timing, where one extraordinary coin can rise far above its peers and become a legend whispered about at coin shows, auction houses, and collector forums. And what makes this story so captivating is the idea that such a coin could still exist unnoticed, sitting in a drawer, a jar, or a forgotten collection, waiting for someone curious enough to look closely, weigh it, examine it under magnification, and recognize the subtle signs that separate a common cent from a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. And that's why the 1991 1 cent continues to ignite imaginations, because it reminds us that numismatics is not just about money, but about history, chance, and the thrill of discovery, where a small copper-colored coin can carry a story worth millions. And as collectors continue to search, study, and submit coins for authentication, the legend of the $11,001,991 penny only grows stronger, fueling the dream that somewhere out there, the next record-breaking error is still waiting to be found.